tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
This transition plan to remove open net pen fish farms is supported by the majority of First Nations in British Columbia.
Ottawa says open net salmon farms in BC must be phased out by 2029, but that's 5 years later than first planned. Plus,
based upon his criminal history, we truly believe that there's more victims that he's responsible for.
Police look into possible links between two unsolved murders in BC and a now dead American serial killer. And
I go up and down that coast and talk to hundreds of people. This riding, just like this province, is in the mood for a change, and they want a major change.
Another BC United candidate defects to the BC Conservatives, the third in recent months.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. The federal government is delaying its ban on open net salmon farms in BC. But as the CBC's Rafferty Baker explains, that announcement comes with a clear timeline, an end to open net farms in 2029.
It's salmon farms like this along BC's coast, often growing Atlantic salmon to feed a hungry market, protein-rich food, and for many and often remote communities, good jobs. But the open net salmon farms are controversial. Wild salmon populations are in dramatic decline.
This keystone species is presently facing unprecedented threats. It is clear from all data sources that Pacific salmon are experiencing serious, sustained population declines with many runs on the verge of collapse.
There's climate change, habitat destruction, overfishing, and Wilkinson also looks to the harm caused by the fish farming operations. That's a point with more and more support from independent scientists. In 2019, the federal Liberals campaigned on banning open net salmon farms, promising it would happen by 2025. So now a delay of 4 years.
This decision is a win for wild Pacific salmon.
For folks focused on the success of wild salmon, the clear deadline for the ban is a welcome development. BC is now the only jurisdiction on the west coast of North America where open net salmon farming is allowed. Washington State banned it 2 years ago.
Given the challenges that Pacific salmon face, we would have preferred a shorter timeline than the 5-year license announced today. Yet, we must acknowledge the need for thoughtful and well-supported transition for people.
And I can categorically say to all of you that this transition plan to remove open net pen fish farms is supported by the majority of First Nations in British Columbia.
Chamberlain says 120 First Nations support the government's new transition plan, but there are others who oppose the ban, citing the roughly 500 aquaculture jobs in remote First Nation communities.
It reduces the pressures of the wild stock and meets demand of affordability.
The feds say the license renewals will come with stricter rules, including better management of sea lice on farmed fish, improved industry accountability, and monitoring of interactions with sea mammals. Rafferty Baker, CBC News, Vancouver.
Homicide investigators have now identified the victim of a killing in Surrey's Port Kells neighborhood. Police say 30-year-old Tori Dunn was found with life-threatening injuries on Sunday night in a home near 98th Avenue and 182A Street. She was rushed to hospital and later died. Officers and police dogs arrested a suspect nearby. That person's being held in jail on an unrelated charge. The Integrated Homicide Investigation Team says its thoughts are with Tony's family and the community. RCMP are searching for a suspect involved in an attempted sexual assault in Kelowna. Police say it happened along a trail in Mission Creek Regional Park just before 9 p.m. on June 9th. The suspect is said to be a white man, about 50 to 60 years old, with short gray hair. He was wearing a gray or white long-sleeve jacket with red coloring on the shoulders. Police are asking anyone with video surveillance or dash cam footage from that area between 8:30 p.m. and 9 p.m. on June 9th to reach out to them. It has some advice as well.
To be cognizant of where your surroundings are, and if you see anything suspicious, to please report it. We still encourage the use of the park and the trail system. It's just to ensure that you're aware of your surroundings, and if you see something, report it.
Mounties say they have also increased patrols in that area. CBC News has learned there may be connections between a now dead American serial killer and 2 unsolved murders in BC. Police say advancement in DNA tracing technology linked Gary Allen Swery to the deaths of 4 women in Alberta decades ago. Ali Patarge has more on why his time in our province is now of interest.
It's been a month since Alberta's Historical Homicide Unit announced a breakthrough. Police linked now dead serial killer Gary Allen Swery to the deaths of 4 young women in Calgary back in the 1970s. Now, police have told CBC News he may be linked to 2 unsolved murders in southwest BC. Police say Swery spent time in BC from the mid to late 1970s until 2003, where he was deported back to the U.S. from New Westminster. They have not told us the details of the 2 BC cases, but for now, police are fielding tips from the public.
Based upon his criminal history, we truly believe that there's more victims that he's responsible for, both who could be victims of homicide or of serious assaults, because we know that he had surviving victims.
Investigators are working to piece together a timeline of Swery's time in Canada. Here's what we know so far. Swery fled to Calgary illegally around 1974 after a rape charge in California, where he had an extensive criminal record, including burglary and kidnapping. In Canada, he lived a transient lifestyle, working as a cook, and often changed appearances, places of residence, and aliases, including Willie Blackman and Rex Long. Mackenzie says he also worked in some capacity for BC Ferries. Around 1980, police believe he had made his way to the Lower Mainland, the Sunshine Coast, and the Fraser Valley. Then in 1998, he was arrested in New Westminster and jailed for 5 years before being deported back to Idaho in 2003. Police are focusing on his activities in the Lower Mainland and the Sunshine Coast in their investigation.
I'm quite optimistic that our investigation won't end with the release of our 4 victims and their killer being identified. We're hoping that we can share that message with more families. That's the goal here.
Anyone with information on Gary Allen Swery is asked to contact the Alberta Historical Homicide Unit. Ali Patarge, CBC News, Vancouver.
Montreal police say they have now arrested a man in Prince George suspected of killing a Montreal rapper last month. Christopher Sean Jean Vilson, also known as Dirty S, was shot and killed in Montreal on May 14th. The 27-year-old was known to police for being associated with street gangs. Police have since arrested a 31-year-old man in connection with his death at this Prince George motel. Officers say the suspect will be sent back to Montreal to be charged with first-degree murder. A 25-year-old man was also arrested in Quebec on Wednesday and is also facing a first-degree murder charge. And Montreal police have issued an arrest warrant for a 3rd man, Dylan Denis, who also allegedly participated in the killing. BC's Police Complaint Commissioner has called its first ever public hearing into allegations of sexualized misconduct involving a Vancouver police sergeant. BC's Police Complaint Commissioner says the allegations against Kieran McConnell relate to his conduct towards 7 women, including police officers and former students, when he was an instructor at Royal Roads and Kwantlen Polytechnic Universities. The commissioner notes these allegations have not been proven. This is the first public hearing arranged by the Office of the Police Complaint Commissioner since changes came into effect that allowed a hearing to happen earlier in the police discipline process. A date for the hearing has not been set yet, and the complainants will remain anonymous. BC United has lost yet another candidate to the BC Conservatives as the fall provincial election inches closer. As our Katie DeRosa reports, it's another blow to the official opposition as they try to combat sagging polling numbers.
The BC Conservatives have snagged another candidate from BC United, the 3rd in the past 2 months. Conservative leader John Rustad introduced Chris Moore as the candidate for Powell River Sunshine Coast, a riding the BC NDP have held since 2005.
And of course, he was a former candidate for the BC United Party. So we're very pleased to have Chris come over and join us to be part of the team and to run and represent the Conservative Party of British Columbia.
A businessman and former councillor for the District of Sechelt, Moore says he left BC United because he was unhappy with their attacks on BC Conservative candidates. BC United tried to trump Moore's announcement with a message on social media Wednesday morning. The the party claims Moore disagreed with the official opposition's strategy of releasing what they say is factual information about extremist BC Conservative candidates. Moore rejects that criticism, arguing he'd rather see the two right-of-centre parties work together to defeat the governing NDP.
The last thing I would be doing is joining an extremist party. That, though, does bring up one of the key components that I really struggled with the BC United was their communication strategy, this conflict between the United and the Conservatives, when in essence we are similar.
While Moore doesn't want to call his move a defection, it leaves BC United scrambling for a new candidate. It's already lost 2 MLAs to the BC Conservatives. Eleanor Sturko and Lauren Dirksen crossed the floor in recent weeks as polls put BC United a distant third behind the NDP and Conservatives. Moore's move also raises questions about whether any donations he raised under the BC United banner stays with that party or moves with him to the BC Conservatives. The Election Act isn't clear on that, leaving the door open for a legal challenge. Katie DeRosa, CBC News, Victoria.
Communities in Nanaimo are one step closer to getting more cancer care. Island Health and BC Cancer have now put out a request for proposals for a construction manager for a new cancer centre at Nanaimo Regional General Hospital. Construction is set to begin in the summer of 2025 with a goal of seeing patients in 2027. BC's Health Ministry says it expects to choose a manager by August. The centre will provide radiation therapy, an outpatient ambulatory care unit, and a new PET and CT machine for people in Nanaimo. Well, it is better news for swimmers upset about the closure of the beloved and aged Kitsilano Pool. Vancouver's mayor and a fellow ABC councillor have now put forward a motion to replace it. Mayor Ken Sim and City Councillor Sarah Kirby-Young say Kit's Pool is now at the end of its service life after being in use for over half a century. They suggest a new pool ought to be built with whirlpools, steam baths, and improved accessibility. The motion asks City and Park Board staff to report back to Council with a funding plan for pool replacement by the end of July. The motion will go to Council next week. Canada's second largest airline, WestJet, is now cancelling flights and parking planes in anticipation of a strike. The airline says it will cancel 40 flights by the end of this day, affecting about 6,500 passengers. So far, 4 WestJet flights out of YVR are canceled for Thursday. WestJet's maintenance engineers and other technical workers have issued a 72-hour strike notice. They can walk off the job Thursday night. The two sides have been trying since November to reach their first collective agreement. The company has asked the federal government now to appoint an arbitrator. The province is asking for your feedback on the designs for stations on the Surrey-Langley SkyTrain extension.
We're now at the point that we're moving forward with our preferred proponents, and we're really keen to hear what people have to say and what they think of this initial stage of design.
The project is set to add 16 kilometers of track stretching from King George Station into downtown Langley City. Officials held an open house in Surrey Tuesday afternoon, showing the renderings there of 8 new stations that will be built and asking people what they think.
I'm not excited about the traffic. It's already a problem on Fraser Highway.
We just want to know how long it's going to be before the SkyTrain is in.
Having a SkyTrain station right by our house would be very convenient for me, especially.
3 more in-person sessions will be held in June, along with a virtual open house. The province says it's also accepting online feedback until the end of this month. Darius Madavi joins us for a first look at the weather. Several people today, good sir, said today felt like the first day of summer. There was something in the air.
Oh, yes. I think it's the lack of clouds that are in the air.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'll write that down.
Lots of blue skies. Beautiful day. Nothing but sunshine. Going to be the same story for most people across the province over the next few days. In a few places, especially inland, we may see some convective activity, some storms popping up, some showers at times, just a bit of cloud building in. But generally speaking, we're going to be fairly sunny over the next few days. Now, we do have a couple of wind warnings in place, just marine warnings, really. So be aware of that if you're going to be on the water. But really, nothing too serious. If we take a look across the province, you're going to see, again, a few of those showers popping up in places and some clouds starting to clear out pretty soon as we continue to get into the end of this week. By Friday, we're going to see less and less of that cloud as the sunshine really takes over. I also wanted to point out that for the more northern parts of the province, because we don't see much thunderstorm activity happening down south right now, even though we don't have radar coverage up here, we can tell where we do have some of those storms because we do have the ability to detect lightning strikes up there. So some places where you see this, especially where there's really concentrated lightning, you can expect there might be some downpours or some more serious thunderstorm activity happening in those areas. So just something that I thought I'd point out, that there is a little bit of activity happening right on the Yukon border, BC territory border. Now, if we take a look at the conditions across the province, across the southwestern BC over the next couple of days, we're going to see again a little bit of cloud clearing out over the next few days. By Friday, overnight into Saturday, we see a little bit more cloud building in, mostly over the North Island, west coast of the island, but maybe making its way down to Metro Vancouver as well. But generally speaking, we're dry, we're sunny. It's going to be a really lovely end to the week, Dan, and probably a dry weekend for most of us.
Okay, we'll check in later. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
One of BC's last standing grain elevators is being torn down. Creston has been home to two iconic elevators since the 1930s. Their nearly 6-story high structures were originally used to collect and store locally grown grain products. Columbia Basin Trust bought the pair in 2018 to try to preserve the historic towers and the community's agricultural roots. Well, one of them was successfully restored last year. The neighboring elevator has now become a safety issue. The trust says the white elevator has a failing foundation, along with some internal and roof structure issues.
Despite this very difficult news, we are really proud of what's been accomplished with the red elevator, with a lot of community support to get it to the state that it's in today. So we do say to residents that there is reason to be proud that part of your incredible heritage has been preserved, and we do look forward to the future conversations of other uses for the salvaged material and that site. And I think in future we could look back at this as being a very difficult but necessary decision.
Streliaf adds much of the lumber from that structure will be saved and used for community projects, and the trust plans to work with the community to find uses for that vacant land once the elevator is gone. Are all poultry equal in the eyes of the law? That's a question that's come up after the city of Vancouver lost a bid to overturn a court decision about guinea fowl. The provincial court decision found a woman was keeping the birds as pets. Now, BC's Supreme Court has also sided with her. Benit Brage spoke with our Yasmin Khanea about the decision earlier.
How did this court battle start? To understand this bizarre battle, you have to go back to 2022. Ariel Reed, pictured here, had 2 guinea fowl hens in her backyard, and she was living in East Vancouver. Her neighbors complained to the city that the birds were too noisy. She was charged under a city bylaw, and she was ordered to remove them. There they are, ghost and darkness. And so she was ordered to remove them, but then she went to court, took the city of Vancouver to court, and a judge sided with her, as you said. He said that she was keeping them as pets for the joy of companionship, and the city of Vancouver was not happy with that. Flash forward, BC Supreme Court, they said it doesn't matter why she was keeping them, it still violates the bylaw, but a BC Supreme Court judge said, nope, because the bylaw doesn't explicitly say guinea fowl. Wow. Yeah.
Okay, so clearly so much dedication here.
Yes.
How is she feeling about this victory?
Well, you know, Benny, it's actually very bittersweet because on one hand, she represented herself and won twice against the city, but she had to rehome Ghost and Darkness because she was afraid she was going to lose in court. So they live on a farm in Pemberton now. So she, in her eyes, there aren't really any winners. She says she wishes that she and the city could have worked something out outside of court. And yeah, because this took her a lot of time, effort, and money, and also on the city, which, by the way, if they choose to, they can escalate this even further to the province's highest court.
Not the highest court.
Yes, and they have about a month to appeal that decision, but they tell me they're still, you know, considering their options, looking at the decision.
Well, who knows? Maybe they will reunite. Thank you. All right, thanks, Yasmin.
Talking about grief can be very difficult. After the break, though, we take a look at how to start those conversations and what the process looks like. Stick around. This week, we're taking a look at the various ways British Columbians live with loss and grief. People often describe grief as passing through stages like denial, anger, and maybe acceptance. That may not be the case, though. We're now joined by Heather Mohan, the Executive Director of Lumara Grief and Bereavement Care Society. She founded Camp Carey in 2007. It's Canada's first family bereavement retreat program. Heather, we appreciate your time here. Let's start with this idea of the stages of grief. Do you think that's an accurate way to look at the grieving process?
Absolutely not. Thank you so much for having me. This is such an important conversation. We know there's thousands of children and families who are in this situation right now, who are dealing with the loss of a loved one, and they're caught in this sorrow and not knowing where to turn or what kind of resources are available for them. So this idea of the stages of grief is a very unfortunate oversimplification of what a grief process actually is for people. It really reduces the complexity. It sort of suggests that everybody goes through the same process, which is just not true. And I think, one of the problems with this idea, which is very widespread in Western culture, particularly in medicine and in the field of psychology, is that it sets up sort of an idea of judgment, that there's a correct way to move through a process of grief. And it also really limits this understanding of a real grief experience involves physical symptoms, emotional symptoms, cognitive symptoms, things that influence your spiritual ideas and your social networks and your relationships. So it really oversimplifies it and creates judgment and harm for people. So we would really like to stand against that idea.
Are there cultures or other practices throughout the world that perhaps, if this is the right phrase, do it better or have a more connected understanding to grieving, do you think?
That's a great question, and I think one that deserves probably more time than we have to delve into today. But I would say that what's more helpful for people, and this comes at Lumara, we work a lot with Indigenous communities, and we have a more holistic view of grief. So, and that's been something that's been part of Indigenous culture for since time immemorial, is this idea that grief is a holistic experience, and it's a relational experience, so that we're always in relationship with the people that we love who have died, and that relationship, although obviously different after someone has died, is ongoing. And that's actually a very that's another myth that we run into that comes out of this idea of stages, that you have to let go of people and disconnect from them in order to move on. But really, if we think more in a relational sense or a holistic sense of grief, we don't need to let go of people. We need to make a different kind of relationship, one that's rooted in memory and legacy and ethics and shared values, but not one that says that we have to let go of people that we love, because that's a hard thing for people who are grieving to grasp.
And last question, I appreciate your time. Can you tell us just a little bit about Camp Carey and how you support people through that process there?
Absolutely, yes. As you mentioned, Camp Carey is Canada's first family bereavement program, and sadly still one of the only. There's a huge need. We have long wait lists, and we create a space there where families, entire families, can come together and spend 4 days learning more about grief, being met with compassion and a supportive community, meeting other people like them who've been through a similar thing. And it really helps people to not feel so alone. And as I said, there's a huge need. We wish we could offer this program to everyone. People are certainly welcome to go onto our website and to find out more information. It's just lumarasociety.org. But we're really trying to create an environment where people are not limited by these kind of common myths of grief, and instead they find acceptance and validation.
Heather Mohan, we very much appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Anti-Asian language, harassment, and eggs thrown at their own home. That's what one Ottawa family had to endure from their neighbors. After the break, more on why police in the city are looking into this. An Ottawa woman of South Korean descent says her family has endured 2 years of harassment and noise from a neighbor. This includes anti-Asian remarks and eggs thrown at their house, all caught on camera. The video has gone viral and is sparking outrage across the country. Faith Greco has more and a warning for you. This story does contain racist and offensive language.
I hate Asians. You do? Oh. Why, honey? Why would you hate them? They're so ugly and they can't talk English.
This front door security footage shows a man and woman making fun of the family that lives inside. Later, it becomes more than just words. When CBC News visited the suburban street, a temporary fence had been erected. A clear message: no trespassing. The woman who put it up is currently on a trip to South Korea, but says her family has endured 2 years of harassment and noise from their neighbor. CBC is not identifying the woman due to safety concerns. In a statement, she writes, "The situation has severely affected our new home, disrupted our daily lives, and deprived us of sleep, health, and happiness."
Last name is
Ask the neighbors, and no one seems surprised.
They open the windows and start screaming, "Oh, you Asians, go back to your home, go back to your country."
The kids can't sleep at night because they're blasting music at very high volumes.
Since January of last year, this house has been the subject of more than 90 bylaw complaint calls. Ottawa Police's Hate and Bias Unit is also now investigating the latest egg-throwing incident.
There's a lot of Asian folks here, and there's other ethnicities here too. Like, we all get along well. So just hearing just like one neighbor having issues with just the Asian community in general, it's just unfortunate and sad.
And this story has now traveled well beyond Ontario. Former BC MP Nellie Shin says she too has heard from Ottawa's Korean Canadian community. Quote, "The Asian community in Ottawa and across Canada are watching to see how authorities will handle the Barrhaven incident to restore trust if any is broken. Actions speak louder than words." A man who identified himself as a part of the accused household claimed that, quote, "As one of the only white families in the neighborhood, they are the ones being bullied." But he later backed out of answering our questions after contacting a lawyer. Faith Greco, CBC News, Ottawa.
Canada's national men's soccer team is getting set for another big international test. For the first time ever, the country will compete in the Copa America, and its debut match is a banger, taking on World Cup champion Argentina, led by the great Messi. Jamie Strachan is with the Canadian team.
For Canada's men's soccer team, another huge international test. The Copa America features the best of South, Central, and North America, and Canada starts off against arguably the best of them all. Canada, massive underdogs against Lionel Messi and world champions Argentina.
The uniqueness of having the global football spotlight on you, playing the best team in the world that has potentially the greatest player of all time, that is special.
After failing to win a game at the World Cup, Copa America, the South American Championships, offers Canada another chance to prove itself as it prepares to host the World Cup in 2 years.
If Canada wants to be competitive on home soil in 2 years' time, then they really have to be playing teams of this caliber on a regular basis, of Argentina, Peru, and Chile.
Canada's roster under new coach Jesse Marsh, much the same as the World Cup, including international stars Alphonso Davies, Kyle Larin, and Tejan Buchanan. But the biggest draw this week is Lionel Messi, global superstar. The sold-out crowd in Atlanta will include Messi fans from around the world, including this father and son from Vaughan, just north of Toronto.
I'm from Argentina and I'm from Canada. And I met almost all the players in Canada, but I also met almost all the players in Argentina. And Messi is one of my favorite players.
They traveled to Qatar to watch Messi play in the World Cup, making the much shorter trip to Atlanta an easy decision.
I'd be happy with that. Just the fact that I'm there and get to witness this game that doesn't happen often with both my countries involved. It's a win-win for me.
all hoping to see Canada put its best foot forward against one of the greatest players to ever play the game. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Atlanta.
Baseball legend Willie Mays is being remembered for what he brought to the game and the fun he had on and off the field. The Hall of Famer died yesterday at the age of 93. As Lindsay Duncombe shows us, his legacy is ingrained in that sport.
It was fun to watch Willie Mays play baseball. So much talent, remarkable skill, and joy.
He had power. He could hit home runs, but he also had amazing speed. He was like an antelope.
And could he ever catch? Here, famously, over the shoulder at a full sprint.
People talk about the catch, and I don't understand why, because I did many things other than just, catch a ball.
Mays was from Alabama, where he played as a teenager in the Negro League. 4 years after Jackie Robinson broke baseball's color barrier, Mays joined the Major League New Jersey Giants in 1951. Years later, Mays moved west to San Francisco with the Giants, racking up astounding statistics. 660 home runs, 12 Golden Gloves, 24 All-Star games.
He was one hell of an athlete, a great ball player, great human being.
Fergie Jenkins, the first Canadian inducted into baseball's Hall of Fame, knew Mays as a competitor and an all-star teammate.
He was always a guy that had a lot of one-liners, smiled all the time, talking about the different teammates he played with and against. But he was kind of the life of the party in the clubhouse.
Still, being a black player in the 50s and 60s was not easy.
The abuse was so heavy, so venomous, and it was time that he had to decide. And he looked at me and said, I didn't know if I wanted to keep doing it.
Never overtly political, Mays' example of excellence, of humanity, became a catalyst for change.
It's because of giants like Willie that someone like me could even think about running for president.
Say Willie, say hey. A life of inspiration on the baseball field and so far beyond. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
And it's time to tip our hat to our own CBC colleague and friend, Karen Larson. Karen has been made an honorary fellow at Douglas College, that school's highest honor. She was awarded the title at a graduation ceremony today. Douglas College President Dr. Kathleen Denton says that the success Larson has achieved in multiple areas exemplifies the adaptability, resilience, and leadership that we encourage our students to develop, and that her exceptional contributions in both sports and media serve as an inspiration to our community and beyond. Yes, Karen is an Olympian, sports journalist, news reporter, and all-around great person that we love to have in our newsroom. We are blessed to have her. Karen, congratulations. So well earned. And at 6:38, there's a live look at the Port of Quebec, where there is a heat warning in place in much of that province and beyond. How Canada is coping with that heat after this. A stifling heat dome remains settled over central and eastern Canada, with heat warnings in effect from Ontario all the way to Newfoundland. A ridge of high pressure stalled over eastern North America is being blamed for that exceptionally hot and humid weather. Well, many are enjoying this first blast of summer temperatures, but as Kayla Hounsell reports, officials warn it could be very dangerous.
For many, it is a welcome early burst of summer.
So amazing. I love it.
But experts are warning the heat dome currently sitting over 6 Canadian provinces is cause for concern.
These types of events can have very severe impacts on health, illness, and death.
There you go. At this tent encampment, a much-needed water delivery.
I feel sick. I feel like I'm having a heat stroke.
There have already been widespread temperatures above 30 degrees and a humidex value above 40. And that hot, humid weather is expected to stay in most of Ontario, Quebec, and Atlantic Canada until Friday, without even a break at night.
All that moisture during the day makes it hard for the temperature to drop off at night, and to see any real reprieve.
Toronto is dealing with transit delays because heat can cause train tracks to soften and expand, causing delays. Montreal is approaching its all-time record for June, 35 degrees back in 1964.
I'm not putting a lot of clothes on so he can sleep. And for me, I mean, just gonna be in the shade as much as possible.
Environment Canada says such a heat wave has rarely been seen this early in June.
I worry for my grandchildren. What is their world going to be like?
In Halifax, these construction workers are calling it a day.
It's too hot to continue. With the humidex, it's 52 right here.
In Fredericton, this cafe owner is also closing early.
The temperature is excruciating. It is really, really hot in our kitchen. So we're going to have a nice staff beach day.
Officials say finding ways to cool off is the right idea, and they say the effect of heat is often cumulative, warning for some it will stick around until Sunday. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Halifax.
52 degrees with humidity, Darius Madavi. Nope.
Nope.
Yikes.
I was, I guess, being conservative, and I was saying 45.
Yeah.
Saying could exceed 45 by quite a bit.
No kidding. Good thing that they're taking precautions. How long is this heat dome going to be stuck there?
We've got today was the worst of it for some people, especially in western parts of Ontario and Quebec. Tomorrow for the Maritimes, probably going to see the worst of it, although today was also quite nasty. Now, again, high pressure system sitting over the region. Honestly, this is the graphic I showed for the News Network audience, but now that it's just us, I can get a little bit more specific. The high pressure system is mostly down here. We've got that ridge extending all the way out over here. So if I was being completely accurate, that's what we would be looking at here. Now, that means that heat is just really completely trapped, and also we're starting to see more of those thunderstorms pop up, in some places severe. Now, if we zoom into just Canada, we can take a look at all those heat warnings still blanketing the region. Very few of those have dropped. We're going to continue to see these into tomorrow, I would expect. Again, some severe thunderstorm warnings here and watches here as well. Keeping an eye out for those. There was also a risk of a tornado, I believe it was yesterday, in parts of Ontario. So again, severe weather can easily come with these kind of extreme heat events, and extreme heat events on their own are already the deadliest type of extreme weather event. Now, I think I've heard some references to what this means for the summer to come, and I saw this graphic floating around. I wanted to mention this sort of seasonal forecast tells you the likelihood that the season on average is going to be warmer than normal. It does not tell you about the frequency of heat waves. If the summer on average is warmer than normal, that probably means that you maybe got a heat wave. It makes it more likely that they're more severe, but does not tell you how many you're going to get. So just wanted to mention that. I also want to mention, because we heard about heat stroke in that pack, the differences between heat stroke and heat exhaustion. Important to know the differences. Both can be dangerous, but if you have heat stroke in particular, if you have these symptoms, that means you need to get help immediately, whereas heat exhaustion can be remedied by getting into a cooler spot and getting more water. Now, all that's going to become more important as our temperatures continue to climb here in BC over the next few days. We're going to get very hot as we get into the weekend. Also quite humid, especially here on the coast and some of the places in the interior. With humidity easily going to be passing 30 degrees for inland parts of Metro Vancouver and very close to it for those of us by the water. In terms of the fire risk, again, that should climb, but as we start to see some precipitation towards the end of this weekend, we might start to see that drop a little bit in the northeast as well. So a little bit of good news possibly coming if that precipitation does make its way all the way up to the northeast. In terms of conditions across the province, mostly just sunny. I think this does overstate the number of storms we're going to see, but there's just a risk in a lot of these places, but most places only going to see sunshine over the next 24, 48 hours or so. And here in Vancouver, pretty much the same story. Mixed skies through the weekend, but should still be a lovely one. No rain likely until overnight Sunday into Monday.
Okay, Darius, thanks very much.
Thank you.
For decades, scientists have been warning us here in BC about a catastrophic earthquake known as the Big One. About that, producer Lauren Bird breaks down a new study shedding light on how and where that temblor might occur and why it could be worse than we first thought.
For decades, people living on the West Coast have been warned about an earthquake so strong it could produce a tsunami the size of a 10-story building. They call it the Big One.
The Big One.
The Big One.
Now, researchers finally have a better picture of how and where that big one could happen.
We do expect this event to be catastrophic.
And based on what we know now, some are predicting that when it does arrive, it could be even more catastrophic than we imagined. In Canada and the US, we live on top of what's called the North American tectonic plate. But under the ocean floor, just off the Pacific West Coast, that plate is intersecting with another plate, the Juan de Fuca plate. Over time, that plate has been slowly moving towards and getting shoved under the North American plate. Most of the time, the two plates are more or less locked in place, pushing against each other and building stress. But if one of them slips, they can generate what's called a megathrust earthquake, the most powerful kind of earthquake we know of, and a giant tsunami. The last time that happened was in the year 1700, and that's got experts worried the next one could be around the corner.
We think the recurrence intervals for the largest earthquakes that occur in this region are 500 years. So, we're 400. The probabilities are high that we're going to see a big megathrust earthquake there in the next 100 years.
But beyond a vague timeline of when this might happen, researchers had very little information to go on. And part of that is because of just how quiet this fault line has been.
It's eerily quiet. So in other plate boundary systems, like in California along the San Andreas fault system, they tend to have a few big earthquakes, but they also have lots and lots of smaller earthquakes. And those small earthquakes illuminate the structure of the plate boundary system.
Without those smaller earthquakes, researchers weren't able to get a clear understanding of what it looked like or where the most concerning parts could be. So a few years ago, a group of scientists loaded up a ship full of state-of-the-art technology and set sail into the Pacific to map it out.
We worked from the California-Oregon border to the northern limit offshore Vancouver Island.
The idea was to create images with sound, the same way bats do with echolocation. They put out microphones, both on the boat and by running waterproof cables along the ocean floor. Then the researchers sent out a bunch of sound pulses directly into the fault line, and the microphones picked up the echoes.
And then we use various algorithms to process the data and generate these high-resolution images.
It's giving us really the first really detailed look at this huge megathrust fault that we've long known about, but we haven't really had many details.
For the first time, researchers realized this fault isn't just one continuous structure running along the West Coast. It's broken up into at least 4 pieces.
The size of those segments is likely to dictate the magnitude of future earthquakes and tsunamis.
This helped them pinpoint where a rupture might cause the most damage. And there's one spot in particular that now has them worried. Researchers found that most of this fault line is relatively jagged. And this is actually good news, because the more uneven it is, the more speed bumps are in the way to slow the movement of tectonic plates. And that could actually limit the size of the earthquake. But if it's smoother, the whole thing could snap all at once, creating a much bigger transfer of energy. And there's one segment that they found that's unusually smooth.
For me, the big take-home point is that the northern part of this fault actually looks quite different from the southern part.
This northern part he's referring to there stretches from southern Vancouver Island alongside Washington State, more or less ending at the Oregon border. And it's here. Researchers now think the big one is most likely to happen.
It's flatter and smoother than the other segments to the south. Those are characteristics that are conducive for the most damaging earthquakes.
And not only is this section smoother than the others, it's also more shallow, meaning the so-called rupture zone would be closer to land.
So that means the source of the shaking could be closer to Vancouver Island, where people live, and Vancouver. And also the source of the tsunami could be a little bit closer to that coastline. So I do think that's important for early warning systems.
The federal government and the province of British Columbia are both working on these early warning systems, meant to give people a few minutes notice before the shaking starts or the waves from the tsunami come in. Researchers say, given what they now know, that notice window could get even shorter.
This information of where the ocean plate is, how it's dipping, how shallow it is, how smooth it is, that feeds directly into our ability to generate and model tsunamis as well and understand what to expect.
Now, if they're larger, that means that they're going to generate slightly stronger ground motions, so they might impact a little further inland. So not just, Victoria and Vancouver Island, but also Vancouver will be heavily shaken in this earthquake.
This is critical new information that will help those cities in particular prepare. They can update building codes, evacuation plans, and model out which areas might be most vulnerable.
The ground shaking is going to be violent. The tsunami wave is going to be, is going to be huge. So we do need to think about how we can better prepare.
And now that we can see what we're dealing with, those preparations, experts say, can't come soon enough.
After the break, we're going to take you to this little creature at the Vancouver Aquarium, an adorable new otter pup found in very rough shape outside Tofino. We'll tell you how she's doing after this.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
CBC is the proud media partner of the Squamish Nation Youth Powwow, July 5th to the 7th. The cultural event welcomes everyone to a vibrant celebration of vivid colors, rhythmic music, and a strong sense of community. Tickets at SquamishNationYouthPowwow.com. And never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter and keep connected with us.
The Vancouver Aquarium has rescued a weeks-old sea otter pup that was found in critical condition near Tofino.
Rescuers say they're cautiously optimistic she will survive under their care, and here she is.
Our newest patient here at the rescue center is a neonatal sea otter pup. She was brought into our center early yesterday morning via Fisheries and Oceans Canada. She was found just outside of Tofino area. Not too sure on the particulars behind the response that Fisheries had. Our focus was getting her to us as fast as possible so that we could stabilize her. They were able to transport the animal down to us and meet us at BC Ferries, and we were able to do a quick transfer over. She was very hungry when she came in and a little bit dehydrated, so we were able to treat her while she was on the ferry. Sea otter pups usually stay with their mums for approximately 6 months. She is approximately, only a few weeks old, so she'd still be nursing from her mom. So we're providing around-the-clock care for her. The rehabilitation of sea otter pups is very intensive. 24-hour care. We are feeding her bottle feeding her every 2 hours. We're swimming her so she can kind of, get some action going. We are also grooming her. It's something that their moms would be doing in the wild. So we're grooming her, and she's also teaching her how to groom. She's actually starting to groom a little bit herself, which is really great to see. And it's basically repeat. It's just she's a baby. Eat, sleep, repeat. Also, labor intensive is also financially intensive as well.
What are we doing here, Dan?
I don't know.
Let's just watch the sea otter pup.
All right.
Yeah.
Good luck, little one.
Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
And Jessica Chung will have your next local news at 11 o'clock right after the National. Good night.